The Energy Transition Podcast takes you directly to the cutting edge of the global energy sector's shift, with a specific focus on the critical role played by oil and gas, as well as the pathways developing around a lower carbon future. Your hosts, Leslie Beyer, Energy Workforce and Technology Council CEO, and Dan Pickering, founder of Pickering Energy Partners, are joined by Josh Lowrey, president of Upright Digital. Each episode engages industry thought leaders in an exploration of market-moving trends and topics, including new technologies, ESG, capital markets, inclusion and diversity, workforce innovation, regulatory influences, and the voice of the people. Join us as the Energy Transition Podcast looks at the state of the traditional energy and oil field service sectors, emerging technologies, and the path ahead in a world of lower carbon energy development.
This is a real treat, and it's a little bit something different. So, Josh Lowrey to my far left, and I have been doing a podcast for the past 6 or 8 months.
Yep.
I think we're somewhere around episode 10. It's called Energy and Transition, and we're actually going to record that podcast today. Correct. While we're here on stage talking to Matt Gallagher. And so it'll be fun. I'm going to turn it over to Josh to give a little bit of an intro, then he's going to turn it back over to me, and we'll pop into the Q&A with Matt.
Well, I just want everybody to know that the Energy and Transition Podcast it's supposed to be a combination of traditional, as Bobby Tudor called it last week, incumbent oil and gas mixed with the transition of what we're going into. And it's to bring people that are unaware of what's going on into all of the different, all of the above ideas and people and players that are here. So if you haven't subscribed to it, I encourage you to look it up on your favorite podcast platform, Energy and Transition Podcast, and follow Dan and I and a lady named Leslie Beyer, who's the president of the Energy Workforce Technology Council. So it's growing, the audience is growing, and we just appreciate the support. So it's good to be here. Josh, thanks for having us at your conference, and Pickering Energy Partners, thank you guys for letting us do this.
Awesome. And Energy and Transition, Matt, you're a perfect person to talk about this because Matt's bio, I think, is in the program. But Matt now runs a firm called Greenlake Energy Capital, Energy Ventures. Sorry, and so Matt's investing in energy technology and drilling oil and gas wells. So you are living in kind of both worlds, if you will. So Matt, maybe just give us a quick background on yourself. Where'd you grow up? Why are you doing this? I saw in your bio, third generation petroleum engineer. Do you think Grandpa's rolling over in his grave with some of the things you're investing in, or would he look at this and say amazing? And then tell us a little bit about Greenlake.
I'd say Grandpa specifically might be rolling over in his grave. He was pretty old school. He graduated in 1937 from Pittsburgh Petroleum Engineering, but at the same time he was an entrepreneur. So that has a lot of overlap here. But he drilled wells all across the country, in Montana and the North Park Basin in Colorado. And then my dad and his 4 brothers actually started running the business, and my dad was the only petroleum engineer of the 4. So I had interesting dinner time conversations with him, and then one of those was, whatever you do, don't become a petroleum engineer. So I went that route, and it played out well because basically it was what I love. I grew up in Indiana, southern Indiana, so there's actually shallow oil fields there and in the Illinois Basin, shallow water floods. And then went to school, Colorado School of Mines, because it was the only place I could play football with that had petroleum engineering, so I couldn't cut it at any of the Texas schools. Went out to the School of Mines to play there, and then once we graduated, went to Pioneer Natural Resources out of Dallas and started the career there, and then jumped over to Parsley Energy in 2010, and there were about 5 of us, so we could have fit on this stage. And then grew it from there, and it was a heck of a run. We were fortuitous in the EOG and others started drilling horizontal wells in 2012 in Erie County, And we were able to catch that wave, and we merged that back into Pioneer Natural Resources. That's when I had the opportunity to reboot, restart, and that's where the idea of Greenlake came from, and wanted to have kind of play hokey pokey and have one foot in both sides.
And so talk to us about what that means. Are you a venture capital guy on the energy transition area, or you call it energy technology? So what's that part of the business mean?
It's fledgling, and it looks new or different every month. Hopefully it's a little bit more refined now than it was in February of 2021. But yeah, it's more on the venture side. So less things that you can look at the future cash flows and hang your hat on the forecast, and it's more upstarts and ideas. But what we're seeing in our benefits and what we've done at Greenlake is a lot more of the adjacent industries are where we're making the investments. So software back end has been good. A lot of this automation that can help reduce your energy consumption, reduce downtime in the field, as well as some Bitcoin overlap that are using natural gas for the generation of the power. And then we've looked at some emission control items. So we looked at a lot. Those are kind of more of the three investment side of things that we've done. But you know, we are by no means experts. So we're just trying to get in with good people with great ideas that have adjacencies to old school fossil. Mm-hmm.
And what do you think about energy transition? I mean, are you a net zero 2050 believer? Do you think we have to do this? What's the rationale for putting money in this space?
I think we have to get better. So at the end days of Parsley, we really made a commitment going back to 2017, and we shifted and became pretty vocal about that commitment 2019 and 2020 about where the oil and gas companies, the E&P companies could go. So that, I think, was early days, and I think you're going to see throughout this decade a lot more results and impacts from that, from the traditional, you know, the majors and the European majors kind of led it, but even the U.S. E&P. So I think it's here. I think it's a have-to-have, and I think we have to get better. And along that comes a lot of new technologies, a lot of new investment opportunities, and you're seeing all of these firms dip their toe in the water with different partnerships. We're all trying to find out where is our expertise that we can leverage. So seeing those opportunities back in the early days meant I wanted to play in that space just with our personal portfolio. So that's kind of what kicked that off. I think it's here to stay. I think it's growing, and I think both sides, though, are important. I'm definitely an advocate for I guess, the incumbent fossil, but definitely an advocate for the energy transition as well.
When you talked about Parsley, and I mean, you're on several boards, right? You're on the Chesapeake board, you're on the Pioneer board now. So do you think energy transition investments, or ESG, do you think is it a check the box because investors want it? Is it we can make money doing this? Is it an inevitability? How do you, tell us about the big company mindset. Is it for real?
Sure. Well, first I'll tell a quick story about the Chesapeake board. So fortunate enough on that board to work with Tim Duncan, who was on the panel before us, true rock star. And when I told my family I was first working with Tim Duncan, they said, "Oh, can you get his autograph?" And I said, "No, not that Tim Duncan." But now that he's kind of a CCUS leader, maybe I should get his autograph.
There you go.
He's still here.
Could be worth something.
Going to hunt you down. But no, those boards are great. Are a great lens into what two leading U.S. E&Ps are doing. And I actually had an investor, this was 2019, at a roadshow in Chicago, a large firm. They were in the top 20 at the time. And they said, sorry, it was 2018, because we didn't have our first sustainability report yet. And they said, "Can you get this sustainability report out there?" I said, "We're staffing up. We're doing the back-end analysis. It's just going to take us a while to get these numbers all compiled." And they said, "Can't you just get a couple of interns? I mean, we just need to check the box." Exact term. That was 2018. Top 20 E&P investor as a generalist that had other investments as well. Well, that shifted quickly to where now you look at the SEC and you look at the Big Four, and they're looking at auditing, the numbers that are in these sustainability reports and the promises that are being made. So these firms are being prepared for that. They're taking it seriously. They're looking at how can this actually benefit our business. This is table stakes now to be an operator. And anything that we're going to commit to, that we're going to measure, we want to be the best. So the things that get measured get improved, and then the things you focus on, you want to be the best at. So I think they're grabbing the bull by the horns and trying to be leaders, and I think both of those are. So it's really pervasive when you look at the new hires throughout those organizations that are really staffing up in all things transition, all things documentation, all things implementation of ESG. So it's the real deal.
You kind of answered my question. I was going to say, are you a forward thinker in this? And Dan's question, is it here to stay? But it really feels like we know this to be true because we're in this room, we're seeking this information out. But how many of your peers that are, that aren't seeking this out, do you see them falling by the wayside? Do you see that you're like, hey, you need to be paying attention to kind of what we were talking about in the lobby? Are people that aren't paying attention to this, are you trying to rattle them a little bit, saying, start listening?
Especially on things that have a global view, such as flaring. So definitely tried to rattle some cages to say that we shouldn't have it in the state of Texas. We have the opportunity, the infrastructure, the planning, the foresight, the collaboration with the utilities and our midstream partners that we can eradicate flaring, and we should be kind of the gold medal for the industry globally, and not a black eye. And there was a black eye a few years ago. You saw we bought a company that was flaring upwards of 20%, and it took us $4 million and about 4 months to get that sub 2%. So it takes just concentrated effort, and it takes a focus. I think everybody has rallied behind flaring. I wish you could be as dramatic on the other things, but I don't think they'll be left behind if they have great rock quality. If they're doing the rest of their operations okay, they're going to skirt by, but they're going to be mid-pack, and they're not going to be top decile. But there are a few things: lowering your flaring, lowering your methane emissions. Everybody's got to be on board in that respect.
You mentioned flaring. Did you believe that before or after you bought the emissions company? I'm teasing. But talk a little bit about the investments that you're making on the venture side. Are you deploying? Is this a $500,000 things? Are they? Do you have to put $10 million into companies to really get exposure to this sort of new energy technology?
I think surprisingly, on our side, all these investments are in the $500,000 range. So there's opportunity, and some of those have the appetite for 50 to 100K, and they're looking for partners that have overlapping experience, that can influence the development of their product, influence, what are the real operational challenges they're seeing. So I'd recommend to anyone out there, there's ways to break into this and be helpful. It's early on, but we're focused on anything kind of continuous. So the spot in time, we did not make any investments in any of the satellite or any of the air flyovers type of things
for emissions.
On emissions, because even the satellites, maybe it's once every 24 hours that's on a good one. So that may not be enough, but on the continuous side, that's when you can really get ahead of something. You can see a leak right away. You can pump through AI, and you can reroute a truck out there immediately. But I think there's opportunities. These things, once they have to go to scale, they're going to need much more dollars behind them than we have at Greenlake on the transition side. But I think there's opportunities across the capital stack and the size for everybody to kind of get in.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen a lot of traditional venture capital. There's the discussion about how that's imploded, and there's a lot of headlines about down rounds and challenges for companies that maybe were ahead of themselves. Is that same thing happening in energy venture, if you will, or are you seeing a lot of competition to deploy capital and therefore valuations how would you describe valuations?
This is where I'm going to show my novice side. I think valuations are ridiculous, even in the ones that we've invested in. We're not focused.
So you're paying up stupid money to.
I think, yeah. When you look at, if you take the gross 8/8 valuation they're putting on that, but we're trying to see, what can you push through that, they're putting in 10, 20 of these things that will end up being 10,000, 200,000 across. So if you get it wrong in this next 2 or 3 years, that's not the time frame we're focused on, and we don't have enough sway or to move the valuation. So it's, hey, do we want to participate or not?
Right.
So still expensive.
Still expensive. Yeah.
But you're paying anyway. It's so good. The coffee's so good, you'll pay $8.
Or is it FOMO?
I'd say that there's a bit of FOMO, but also I think that I see an opportunity where we can influence the outcome, and that's exciting for our team. So we're putting a few chips on the table. Yep.
You got more than a few chips on the table on the oil and gas side.
That's right.
So tell us what you're doing and kind of how you got there, because I remember talking to you a couple years ago, and your view for Greenlake was, we're going to do it ourselves. This is just going to be me and some friends and family. And then the next thing I know, you got a big commitment from private equity. So walk us through your kind of thought process from family company to a bigger thing.
Yeah, no, the ideal situation was to stay private, and we are private, but to stay totally backed by myself and our partners. And you're talking February, March 2021. Our first dollars out of the door on a leasehold were March of 2021. And we're looking at, and since that day, we have been sprinting to get that development online. And thankfully, or knock on wood, we're going to be putting that pad online in September 22nd. So here in 2 more weeks. So I don't know that we could have done it any quicker when you go through the permitting, the pooling phase, procuring the rig, procurement, and drilling. It all went well.
And where is this?
This is in Pecos County, Delaware Basin, in the Permian Basin. So when people say, can U.S. shale respond by this winter? I mean, here's an opportunity, someone getting started March of last year, and production's not coming online until September. If it would have only been that project, I think we could have snuck by on our own, but the word got out and we got some traction, so we were able to pick up 4 or 5 more units, high interest units. Each one, we kind of look at a project, and just the numbers got too large. So we partnered with a firm that I had relations with going back to 2004, but I'm still skeptical with anything private equity. So we have some controls in there where we get to keep family operations, but it's gone great so far. So that was a $200 million commitment through NGP. And we also, Chris Carter and his group over there are really insightful and been great partners. We still have some friends and family in on this development. They've been key to all of this. But since we started drilling operations in January, and we've deployed $90 million of capital just in 8 months' time. So it's the magnitude of the dollars is much different, and that just required some different partners.
I do think that's. Your grandpa would roll over in his grave if he heard things like $90 million in 9 months.
Right.
And so the game's certainly different than it used to be. Talk to us a little bit about, you are real-time, real-world, drilling wells, completing wells. Is it getting more expensive, less expensive? Inflation's a cool thing to talk about. Are we seeing it in the oil patch?
We're seeing it big time at Greenlake, small company. So when we do fresh spot pricing, we do have some contracts in place through March of next year. But if we were to build a spot priced AFE today, it's 40% higher year over year than last year. So you're looking at the public companies are saying 10 to 20%. Well, they have long-term pipe contracts and staggered contracts that have some back-end pricing. So if you were to start fresh today, you're looking at a 40% uplift. The casing, all the steel tubulars, Ukraine took 20% of the OCTG off the market. You're seeing, we were talking about the manufacturing input through the gas in Europe. Well, that's feeding through the whole system. Our cement has gone up quite a bit. Labor, which spiked, I would say, in the first quarter of this year, has been right-sized, has been relatively fixed because we're not seeing that steep slope in the rig reactivation. So labor has plateaued on the cost side, but the steel and the
European
tubulars.
gas is going to get even worse.
It's going to get worse. So what are we going to do there? So there's not clear visibility to this pricing structure plateauing, and I think you're seeing that in the rigs rolling over. So the last 6 weeks we've seen a decline in rig count. So
Why do you think that's happening?
you've got this prompt month increase to, peaked around $120 crude. We're looking at $88 crude now, but you have a steep backwardation. You have all these yellow and even red light signaling from administrations and investors. I just had pulled up on my phone last Friday a subscription service I subscribed to, Rapidan Energy, did 4 summary policy items that came through that week, weekly bullets. You're talking California 35-foot offset rule. You have a potential odds that they're going to ban exports of products from the U.S., so that would greatly obviously drop U.S. pricing and increase global pricing. And 2 other major restrictive policies just proposed in 1 week. So I think you have a softening crude environment due to the SPR releases that have been hitting the tail end of the curve, increasing inflation, and all these red lights from the policy side. It's really hard to invest into.
So does that change? You're getting ready to turn on your first project. How long does your project last? And I mean, are you thinking maybe I shouldn't do something, or it's just getting tougher?
It's just getting tougher, and we've looked at some larger deals over this summer, and we could not underwrite the curve because of this uncertainty. We looked at accelerating a rig, so we have the inventory where we could use 2 rigs through next summer and accelerate those wells. But again, it would put us all on the spot pricing on the tubulars, so it actually would not, you'd capture the front end of the curve and then you'd offset it with your cost increases. So it's not economically beneficial for us to accelerate.
I want to pause and re-emphasize or make sure I understood. So there was a time period not that long ago where if I told you $88 a barrel, we'd be doing high fives and cartwheels off the stage, and how quickly can I drill something? So what you just said is front month or front part of the curve, which slopes down toward 70 over time. So in $70+ environment, accelerating at today's cost does not generate the returns that you need.
That's right. And I wouldn't capture, I think $70 crude is still plenty economic. It's just that the spot price for in the next 3 to 6 months for physically getting the equipment, you're robbing from somebody else, and you're on the tubular
side. We were at the happy hour welcome for the Pickering party last night. We talked to a couple gentlemen that said that any excess inventory that they had left over from any slowdown is now gone, and just getting material is impossible, and people want it immediately. So again, raw material pricing, or raw material unavailable, manufacturing equipment unavailable. So the pricing is just extraordinarily high and unavailable.
Exactly. And not only that, so we're making commitments on the ESG front. And a lot of the partners that came along with us to develop with Greenlake thought that was important. I believe it's important. And so we're going to stick to it. Well, the PME, a primary meter connect, to drop electricity down to energize our facility. We put that order in with TE&MP in about I guess it would have been August of last year. And I bet our field supervision, a steak dinner, that it was not going to be ready because there's kind of a history with the utilities. So the first delivery was set, I think, back in June, and they pounded the table. They said, where are you buying me that steak dinner? And then they got the email and it got delayed, and it got set last week, but it's still not energized. So you still have to have another crew come out and drop the energy to our transformer bank, our line. So again, if we want to accelerate, do we even have the electrical infrastructure needed so that we're not flaring? Right. So There's all these components that go into it, and it's just restarting the energy. I mean, the engine of the economy. It's not just our industry.
No, it's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Matt, how does what you just described play into where do you think U.S. production goes from an oil and gas perspective? Can we, if folks can't accelerate, energy security is being discussed, and the president's asking for more supply. What's our production going to do? I mean, expectations are we'll go back to peak levels of U.S. production. Can we do it?
Let's see. That put us at 13.3 million. That was February of 2020. I think we'll get there over the next decade. I said at that time that I'm never going to see it in my lifetime, so I was a little dramatic. But I think we're in 500,000 a year, so we're still growing. That's the good news, and I think it's healthier growth. It's more durable growth, but it's just can we respond to a dramatic? Can we displace 10 million barrels a day of Russia overnight? No, and that's the hard and fast answer. But I put us at about 500,000 barrels a day of growth over the next decade, so that's another 5 million.
You're saying per year?
Yep, per year. So I think we get to
15 to 17 million.
15 to 17 million. So 10 million is the bogey, and it's all the Permian. The rest of the basins, they're growing month over month right now, but I don't think they'll get much past their peak 2019. So the Permian bogey is over-under is 10 million barrels a day, and I'm taking the under to about 9 million.
Wow.
9 million
Okay.
or so.
And you're getting ready to turn on your first pad. Talk to us. What's Greenlake going to be in 3 years, production-wise?
Yeah. So since we're running a one-rig model, it gets kind of finally self-funding next year, and that kind of plateaus around 10,000 BOE a day. Well, that's net to Greenlake. You got to put the 25% royalty owners on top of that, so 12.5, and then another 10%. So you're about 13.5 gross BOE per day is what you can deliver, and that
on a one-rig program.
One rig, and we're kind of, I would call us, I don't know everybody's definition of core and tier one and fringe. We're kind of tier one and fringe. It's hard to elbow your way back into the core. So the core rigs, they could probably deliver 15 to 17.5 BOE a day on a stabilized basis. So that's from scratch. We had zero base production, and we're just growing up to that 10,000. Of course, that's drilling new inventory. That peak should last 2 years, and then that peak goes on a decline.
Mm-hmm. So U.S. oil production goes up in your estimation, but it's hard to do, and it's hard to go faster. I'm grappling with this issue of you can't add another rig. If you can't add another rig, is that, how are we going to start adding this 500,000 barrels a day unless oil prices go up or well costs come down?
Exactly. I mean, I think if you see, policy easing or policy clarity and the tail of the curve come up, miraculously, everybody finds a way to add rigs, especially the private guys. But again, the private guys don't have the inventory. We're building things a little differently than the public. So yes, we reactivated. We're over 50% of the rig count now, but that's about a 24-month vignette, and then that window starts closing, I believe. So it's a real challenge, especially on the crude side.
Talk about natural gas. Easier?
I think that's a different story. That's all. The inventory is definitely there. It's been artificially constrained. Well, not artificially, market constrained due to pricing over the last 5 years of the last decade. You're looking sub $3 gas, and then you have the basis netbacks. So people probably weren't going to grow into that environment. But then due to that, you weren't getting the new pipelines passed or engaged. Then you see policy restrictions on new pipelines. So now when you have the price signal, if $9 gas is definitely a price signal, you can move into that world. grow into that world, but there's no infrastructure from the key basin, the Marcellus, to grow out of. So that's a basin that has 100 years of inventory, a good 20 years of material growth, depending, you pick your growth percentage, and if there's pipelines there, it can handle it, and it's all policy restricted right now. So the gas is a different story.
So you think, we're a 12 BCF a day LNG exporter. You think that's going up?
I couldn't agree more with Toby Rice's plan. And I think I had a tweet back in March calling on people to act now to get these LNG plants going. And now we're 6 months behind. There's been progress but most of that progress was already commercially available or commercially in flight projects, and it's just matching up the partners there. We still have not seen any real progress on true pipeline infrastructure. So if we want to be an ally to Europe, if we want to be an ally as West and displace some of this Russian gas, we're another 6 months behind. Nobody has done anything material. There's been no strategic sovereigns that have come over and really asked, and there's been no domestic administration engagement. It's been maybe an ask followed up by the next day with these 4 or 5 every week of restrictions, of hurdles to getting this done. So it's a real challenge. I think people need to get serious about it.
Toby says 50 BCF a day of gas exports. That's going to solve the kind of global gas dynamic. That's a big move from 12 BCF a day today. Is that physically possible?
I think you got to aim high. I guess I don't know if that. I think it is physically possible, but it's not practically possible, even with full engagement. But if you aim there and you come up short at 30, it's better than aiming for 30 and landing at 20. So I think it's the right message, and people have to respond and get engaged. And not only that, it's a great transition fuel. You look at the U.S. leading on emissions reduction over the last 20 years, and natural gas has been a big part of that, the transition to combined cycle electrical plants. So it's a good partner to wind, to solar. Looking at a lot of the stuff coming out of Thunderhead research, Rob West, excellent mind, and somehow he got the data over a year by the second, and has mapped the average on time of solar and of wind, and it's surprising the volatility even during the sunny times on solar. I guess you have clouds, you have heavy winds, different things, and dust. So you need a partner in crime, I guess, and natural gas is a good partner to both of those renewable solutions.
We don't mention the word crime here on the Energy and Transition podcast.
I think I cringed when I said
that.
Yeah.
Also, there is information on that on one of our previous guests on the podcast too. So
great,
for what it's worth.
Crime or
yeah, just some of the
intermittency.
Solar,
Yes.
Yeah, intermittency. So clearly, you think that we have good inventory depth for natural gas. We hear a lot. The investors are thinking a lot about inventory quality on the oil side. Some fear that wells are starting to get worse. For a long time they got better. There's fear they're getting worse. Do you think they are? You're drilling some.
Yep. It's all about spacing. So we really have to, as an industry, dial in spacing. We saw, we had a Bates pad that was way too dense. We tried Parsley Energy had a 330-foot. This was sponsored. This was a crime, sponsored by me. I wanted to see what the limit and the extents were, and we tried in the Wolfcamp A and B 330-foot spacing and 330-foot stacks, and that was by all means a disaster. We recovered the same oil in the first year that we could have recovered from just drilling. That was an 8-well project. We could have got that out of about 4 wells. So once you go too dense, you fall off a cliff. And we've seen the industry upspace, especially after the Dominator was probably more popular than our Bates pad.
Dominator was Concho?
Concho, yes. So people took notice and they upspaced, but all that time, during that time, you're fighting, you're still fighting parent-child offset frac hits. So there's a lot of challenges out there. So I think over time, you want to continue to look at drilling one less well, not one more well per unit, because the recovery response is not linear. You could fall off a cliff by putting in one too many wells. So I think that's the name of the game. If you get spacing right, your productivity can plateau for a longer period of time. We are seeing, you look at just the global, the IEA productivity by basin, every single basin of the big four has reduced in productivity over the last 12 months. That could be a lot of things, but I think it's something we gotta look at and maybe take a few more sticks out of the ground.
You get some tweets over there?
I do. So not tweets, but I do have a couple of incoming texts. One that's consistent. It says, what can the Texas Railroad Commission do to encourage more sustainable oil and gas production? And what should the administration do to encourage LNG exports? So what kind of help can we get from government or regulatory entities?
Texas Railroad Commission, I actually commend them. I was actually, voted against or for one of the competitors who was more vocal on flaring in the last Railroad Commission race. But since then, the person that came in has actually embraced that platform and has pushed for education, which is key about what the real requirements are, and B, let's reduce flaring. So big turnaround there, and lots of kudos on that front there to Jim Wright. But I would say the Railroad Commission, if they wanted to be more strict, you have to put in a bunch of things. They could have integration with we could have permitting integration with what I just mentioned with the utilities or with the pipelines. Make sure that you have a pipeline to a facility before you get. There could be a facility permit. I'd hate to add more paperwork. I'm just thinking out loud here, so I'm probably going to regret that. But that's the way we do it. We make sure we have before we go and spud, we at least have the commitment from the midstream and from the utility providers. And of course, what I already mentioned, the challenges even after you have the commitment. So that's one thing they could look at. From the federal side and from the policy side on LNG, we've got a lot of work to do, and it's just do not add additional limitations. The EPA has just put two more stringent requirements on the likes of Cheniere and others on some of their big compression emissions, and it's solely in the near term going to target the capability of LNG capacity. So we've got to phase those in the proper timing, not tomorrow. If that's something that's identified and important, let's put a 2030 timeframe on that, or let's put but you have the president saying we're in wartime. Why aren't we responding? In the left hand or on the microphone, and then on the behind the scenes, you have all these additional things coming at us and the industry tomorrow. So they just need to put the proper time frame with long enough lead time. The industry and everybody in this room and the investors we saw before are going to solve those problems. We just need some time.
Matt, you're a petroleum engineer, but you're investing in energy technology, et cetera. You've had a great career in the oil and gas business. What advice do you give young people thinking about the energy industry today?
So I think the global message to all the young people today are exactly what my dad's message to me was. He said, "Do not become a petroleum engineer." And I went against his grain, and it turned out okay. So I think people, if they have a global appetite, they like interacting with the world. They like human flourishing. They like doing things that are good for the planet. Good for especially people. I'd say look into oil and gas. In oil and gas, you're going to have the opportunity to drive outcomes in the transition, and you're going to have you're going to understand things subsurface. So it's not lost, but it has to be a passion of theirs. They have to be interested in it. And if that's not the case, take a couple minors in it, and then go the energy, go the business route, go the transition route, because that obviously is going to be a growing field for a long time to come.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. We could go another 45 minutes, but we can't. And so one of the fixtures of our Energy and Transition podcast is the lightning round.
Right.
So Josh, are you ready to just pepper? So
I'm ready.
Matt, you don't get to expound on these answers. You just get to say yes, no, or answer. So
One word answer.
With that, kick us off, Josh.
Franklin's Barbecue or Luling's Barbecue?
Franklin's.
House of the Dragon or Rings of Power?
House of the Dragon.
Austin or Midland?
I'm sorry, guys. Austin.
Will the world make net zero by 2050?
No.
Wind or solar?
I'm going to go solar.
Baseball or football?
Football.
S&P 500 for the rest of 2022, bullish or bearish?
Bearish.
Cash or crypto?
Crypto.
Whataburger or In-N-Out?
Arby's.
Arby's. It stands for America's roast beef. Yes, sir. That is true. Puppies or kittens?
Puppies.
E&P stocks or tech stocks?
E&P.
And I'm going to wrap us up with the question I always ask. Will the Houston Texans make the Super Bowl in the next decade?
You probably get this answer a lot. No.
That's right. One guy made him happy.
Yeah. 9 no's and 1 yes. I'll remember that forever. Matt, thank you so much.
Right.
Thanks to the audience for your questions. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Matt Gallagher, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, buddy. Great job.